Hello, third grade, and welcome back to our chapter or our module on survival. For today's lesson, we're going to work on lesson 3, titled Natural Selection.
I know you are around here somewhere. I can hear you. Oh, hello. I'm Owen, and I'm searching for a Gryllus pennsylvaniacus. That's a field cricket to most people. I love capturing photos of insects. I place the photos in my science journal and write about them. When I grow up, I want to be an entomologist. An entomologist is a scientist who studies insects. Did you know that there are still millions of insects scientists haven't discovered yet? Maybe someday I will discover one of them. There you are.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. Our first page in our lesson, we're going to read under where it says natural selection, will the animals survive? So you're going to read through this passage, decide what you think is going to happen, and explain your thinking. Please make sure you use complete sentences, start with a capital letter, end with punctuation, and add detail to your answer. Once you're done completing this section on page 202, we're going to flip to page 203, and we're going to watch a short video about Galapagos finches. And then you're going to write what questions you have. Let's go ahead and take a look at our short video on the Galapagos finches.
A finch is a type of small bird. Here is the Galapagos finch family tree. They are all related, but have variations that make them separate types within the finch family. Ground finches are gray and have strong beaks that are well suited for cracking open seeds. Tree finches are brown and have grasping beaks to catch and eat insects. The woodpecker finch uses sticks as tools to find insects inside trees. Warbler finches can be green or gray depending on their habitat location. All Galapagos finches have some common traits. They are all pretty small, they are not very brightly colored, and they all sing a lilting little song. While there are variations that make these finches different, they have more traits that make them alike. Those traits place them in the larger finch family.
All right, let's go ahead and write out at least 3 questions that we have about the Galapagos finches. Remember to use complete sentences, start with a capital letter, end with your punctuation. And then you're going to read the section about the zoologist. After you've read the section about the zoologist, you're going to answer the 2 questions on the following page. What are some of the zoologist's duties at the zoo? So what are some of the things they're in charge of or some of their jobs? Number 2, what types of things do you think the zoologist takes notes about? Once you've completed that, you're going to give your best answer to our essential question. How do variations in traits provide advantages for survival? So how do these little changes between different groups help them to survive? Write out your best guess, and then we're going to move through and learn about this throughout our lesson. Now, next, we're going to jump right into an inquiry activity, and this is going to be a lot of fun. This is called giraffe feeding. The materials we're going to use are sticky notes and a stopwatch. Who will get the most resources? You will use your observations of people and their individual traits to construct an argument about why some students were more successful at reaching sticky notes at various heights on a wall. Make a prediction. Which students will be more successful at collecting the sticky notes? Then you're going to carry out your investigation. You will have 1 minute to gather as many sticky notes, which are going to count as leaves, from the wall as possible. You're working alone and can only use your hands. You may not stand on anything other than the floor. And you're going to start when we say go. Then you're going to count the number of leaves or sticky notes that you've collected. You're going to share your data with some of your classmates and gather and record data from your classmates. So over here, we're going to repeat this 4 times. Then we're going to answer our questions. What traits did you notice about the students who were able to gather the most leaves? What characteristics do they have? How did those characteristics help them gather more leaves? Number 3, if the sticky notes represent leaves, would you expect similar results if you were to observe giraffes in the wild? Explain. And number 4, construct an explanation. Use your observations to explain about how differences in characteristics lead to survival advantages in the wild. So based on what you saw, describe how you think those differences that they have help them to survive in the wild. How are they helpful to them? Once you've completed that section, we're going to jump in and we're going to take a look at our vocabulary first for this lesson. So our 3 vocabulary words in this lesson are the words predator, natural selection, and competition. Let's go ahead and take a look at our vocabulary. Now, predator is an animal that hunts other animals for food. Natural selection is the process in which only the types of organisms that adapt to their environment over time will survive. So what does this mean? If you have a particular kind of insect and they're usually really light colored, but they start to live in a place that has a lot of very dark colors. And every now and then you'll get one of the moths that are born with a dark color. Those dark colored moths are going to survive longer, and there's going to be more of them surviving because they are blending into their background better than the light colored ones. So natural selection means that over time, the animal that adapts best to its environment is the one that's going to outlive the other ones. And then we have the word competition. Competition means the struggle among organisms for water, food, or other needs. So they're competing against each other to get all of the needs that they, all the things that they need to survive. Next, we're going to read a handout called Trait Variations and Survival on how variations in traits can allow some organisms, remember organisms just mean living things, how some living things survive better than others. And then we're going to answer the questions. What is a variation? How do trait variations affect survival? How does a better sense of smell help a deer? So let's go ahead and read through trait variations and survival. Not all animals are exactly the same. The way one living thing is different from another is called a variation. So variation comes from the word vary, not V-E-R-Y, that means a lot, but V-A-R-Y, which means different kinds. One deer may run faster or have a better sense of smell than another. These variations in traits can help animals to survive. The deer that runs faster may be able to stay safe from other animals or predators. A cactus that has longer or sharper needles may stay safer also. A plant or animal's environment also affects how it develops. A squirrel with a dark fur color may survive better than one with light fur color. This is because its fur may blend in with the forest leaves and ground better. Other animals, especially predators, may not see it. Plants and animals with the most beneficial trait variations will survive best in their environment. So what does that mean? There's a lot of big words here. So plants and animals with the most beneficial, the most benefit, or the best trait variations, those best traits will survive better in their environment than other ones. What are some traits that might help an animal, such as a polar bear or an armadillo, survive in their environment? If the needs of this cactus are sharper or strong, if the needles of this cactus are sharper or stronger than the ones on the other cacti, it may survive better. What traits do the polar bear and the armadillo have to survive in their environments? So take a look over here. Our polar bear has light colored fur that can blend in with its environment. It also has sharp claws and teeth to help catch its food or its prey. The armadillo is similarly colored to the environment that it lives in. So between the trees and the dirt and the ground, it's got a similar color variation to its environment with the rocks and everything that's there. It also has a tougher outside that helps protect it from predators. So what is a variation? How do trait variations affect survival? And how does a better sense of smell help a deer? So based on what you think, tell me your best answer for this section. After you've completed that, we're going to jump into another inquiry activity called Camouflage from Predators. So for this part, we're going to use some construction paper and we're going to use a stopwatch. So you'll model an animal hunting. You'll use your observations to construct an argument about which animal color was harder to identify. So you're going to finish this hypothesis. If an animal is the same color as its environment, then, and you'll tell me what you think here. So in this activity, we're going to use construction paper and we're going to cut out circles of some of the yellow paper and some of the brown paper, and we're going to spread out those 20 of each, so 40 altogether, onto a second sheet of yellow paper. Having a partner time you for 30 seconds. When your partner says go, pick up as many of them as you can, as many circles as you can from the yellow paper. So you're going to count the number of yellow circles you collected and the number of brown circles you collected. And you and your partner are both going to do this. And then you're going to look at your results. Did you and your partner pick up more yellow circles or more brown circles? So tell me using a complete sentence. Which circles were camouflaged? How did this help them to survive? Our next section, we're going to read a handout called Peppered Moths on how camouflage can help an organism survive and reproduce. Then we're going to answer questions 6 and 7 over here. And then as well, we're going to move on to question number 8 before we jump into another handout. Number 6 says, what are the 2 color variations of peppered moths? So remember to use complete sentences. The 2 color variations of peppered moths are, and then you'll tell me, how did the environment of the peppered moth change? And why did the population of peppered moths change? So let's go ahead and read that handout in order to answer these questions. The peppered moth, Byston betularia, is a moth that is commonly found in England. The peppered moth has a mix of black and white spots on its body. The color of the moths varies. Some peppered moths are mostly light colored. Others are mostly dark colored. The peppered moth led scientists to discover something interesting during the 1800s. When the factories were first built in England, there was no control over the dirt and pollution that came out of them. This pollution darkened the trees in the area that had white bark. It also changed things for the peppered moths. The insects often relied on these light-colored trees to rest against. However, the light-colored peppered moths were more easily seen and caught by predators when they rested on dark trees. They stood out against the polluted bark. Then, the dark-colored peppered moths had an advantage. The dark peppered moths could suddenly blend in better with their background. This discovery was an interesting lesson about animal variations to scientists at the time. The population of the moths in the area began to have more dark-colored moths than light-colored moths because more of them survived the predators. These pictures show a light-colored peppered moth and a dark-colored peppered moth. Which would be most likely to survive on dark tree bark? So this was actually really interesting when they discovered it, because even though there was a large population of these light ones, and they were blending in really well with the light colored trees, because of all of that pollution from the factories, the trees had, so much of the pollution had gotten onto the trees and made the tree bark really dark. So now you could see these light-colored moths were so easy to see that they were getting picked off and eaten by predators and birds. So now the dark ones could blend in a whole lot better because the trees were dark and the moths were dark. So the ones that were able to survive longer and reproduce more ended up being the dark ones. And then the population of dark moths grew to be more than the population of the light moths. All right, let's jump back and answer our questions. What are the 2 color variations of peppered moths? How did the environment change? So think about the factories. What did the population of why did the population of peppered moths change? We were just talking about that. Next, we're going to read a handout called Variations and Natural Selection on examples of variations that help plants and animals survive and reproduce. And then we're going to answer these questions. So number 9 says, which variation in giraffes helped them to survive? How did this change the characteristics of giraffes today. And number 10, what is natural selection? Use natural selection to explain the characteristics of prickly pear thorn bushes today. All right, let's go ahead and jump into that handout. Variations in natural selection. Most animals and plant traits vary between individuals. Certain variations of the trait help the animal or plant better survive in its environment. Variations in giraffes. Some early giraffes had longer tongues than others. Giraffes pull and eat leaves off tree branches using their tongues. Those giraffes with longer tongues were able to reach more leaves. They got more food and survived to reproduce. Their offspring also had longer tongues. This process repeated over generations. Variations in leafy sea dragons. Trait variations can also be found underwater. Leafy sea dragons need to hide from predators. They use camouflage to hide in underwater plants. There is a lot of variation in leafy sea dragon color and body shape. The sea dragons that look more like plants in their area survive and reproduce. Populations of leafy sea dragons in different locations will be different based on the type of plants in that area. So what does that mean? That means in each area, the underwater plants look a little bit differently. So the variations of this particular animal, the leafy sea dragon, is going to look different in each one of those areas because the ones that survived and reproduced most were the ones that looked most like the plants in that particular area. Variations in prickly pear thorn bushes. Trait variation is also seen in plants. At one point, there was more natural variation in the size of the thorns on a prickly pear thorn bush. These thorns helped keep animals that would eat the bush away. The bushes that had longer thorns did the best at keeping animals away. Those bushes survived and reproduced. Now the prickly pear thorn bush has long thorns to keep predators away. Natural selection. Natural selection is where organisms that are best suited to their environment survive and pass on traits to their offspring. This allows these organisms to thrive and allows them to continue to reproduce. At the same time, organisms that are less adapted fail to survive in their environment. They could be completely eliminated from the environment. Competition among plants and animals. Every environment has limited amounts of resources. As a result, living things must compete for these resources. Competition is the struggle among living things for resources. Competition can be a cause of environmental change. Some people bring new organisms into an environment. These new organisms can harm the environment by competing for limited resources like water, food, or space. For example, kudzu plants grow quickly and can overtake a large area, using up water and nutrients that other plants need to survive. In this picture, kudzu has grown and taken over this section of the forest. The effect of the kudzu plant crowding the other plants is they may not get the water, sunlight, and nutrients that they need to survive. So here you can see that it's pretty much taken over everything. And in order for it to survive, it needs the water and the nutrients and the things that come from the environment, but it's also pulling those resources from the plants that were already there using it. So which variation in giraffes helped them to survive? You can go back to the beginning of that handout to answer this question. How did this change the characteristics of giraffes today? So what do we see more often in giraffes today? Number 10, what is natural selection? Use natural selection to explain the characteristics of the prickly pear thorn bushes today. And then we're going to investigate how camouflage can help an animal survive by revisiting the simulation and the questions that we answered on page 194 in our handbook. Use evidence from the simulation to explain how the rabbit population might change in each environment. So you can go back to the video lesson, the previous video lesson where we were looking at the simulation with the rabbits of different color and the hawks in the snowy environment and in the desert environment. So use what you remember from that simulation to explain how the rabbit population might change in an environment. So if we were looking at rabbits in a snowy environment, which ones are most likely to survive? If we were looking at a desert environment, which ones were most likely to survive there? Make sure you use complete sentences and lots of details. You don't need to answer the I can statement. And then we're going to skip ahead and we're going to jump on to page 215 about the Galapagos finches. A zoologist needs to understand how the traits of organisms help them survive in their environments. You will study the Galapagos finches and use what you learned in the lesson to explain how their adaptations help them survive. So you're going to rewatch that video that we looked at from the beginning of the lesson and answer the questions after you finish watching. Write a question about the Galapagos finches that you would like to find an answer to in your research. And then you're going to fill in the information for these different finches. So the tree finch, the woodpecker finch, the warbler finch, and the ground finch. You're going to list their habitat, their food source, and the adaptations that they have. Then you're going to construct an explanation. Why do the finches have different adaptations? So what's the reason that they're different from each other? Why aren't they all the same? And number 2, would the adaptations of the ground finch help the tree finch to survive? What would happen to a tree finch that was gray? So think about the environment, think about their color of their environment and the color of these birds, and what would happen to them if we changed it up. And then for our essential question, think about the video of the Galapagos finches. Use the finches to explain how variations in traits provide advantages for survival. And again, you don't need to do the I can or the I did statement at the end. Please make sure you use complete sentences, neat handwriting, and lots of detail in all of your answers. If you have any questions on this lesson, definitely let me know. Otherwise, I hope you have an amazing day. Take care. Bye-bye.